Welcome everybody to Clearwater Jazz Holiday Foundation's Young Lions Jazz Master virtual sessions. Today's educator is James Suggs, and his topic is improving your technique. Participants are muted during these sessions for the courtesy of others. All of these sessions are being recorded for the purposes of Clearwater Jazz Holiday education and outreach. If you have a question, feel free to use the raise your hand feature or the chat feature, and we will make sure we get those questions for James. James loves questions, and so please don't be shy with them. If you have any feedback about today's session, or if you'd like a topic covered in the future, email info@clearwaterjazz.com, INFO, and we'll make sure that we can try to coordinate that for you. We also thank our sponsors for helping to expand the reach of Clearwater Jazz Holiday education and outreach. The Al Downing Tampa Bay Jazz Association has been wonderful, as has the Pinellas Realtor Organization and many others. And we're going to try to keep these sessions going in this format well into the summer. So hopefully you'll enjoy them. So James is very special to the Clearwater Jazz Holiday community. He participates regularly in our Young Lions Jazz Master sessions that we do at a main event every year in December, but also in the schools throughout the year, working with band directors. And he also participates in our History of Jazz outreach program and our My Journey with Jazz program, which are built around music appreciation and jazz history. James is a professional trumpet player currently living in St. Pete after spending 8 years living and playing in Buenos Aires, Argentina. James's resume is long and impressive. Started playing trumpet at the age of 9, and since that time his talents have taken him all over the world. He studied with some greats and played with some amazing artists, and we're very lucky to have him with us. He received a master's degree in music jazz performance from the University of South Florida, and also serves as an adjunct professor at University of South Florida. To connect with James or to learn more, please visit with him on Facebook, and be sure to check out his music wherever you stream your music. James, welcome to the Young Lions Jazz Master virtual sessions, or I should say welcome back. The stage is all yours.
Thanks so much, Steve. Like I always say, it's a pleasure doing these. Pleasure working with Clearwater Jazz in general, but especially these crazy times that we're in. It's really refreshing to have this outlet, not just to tell people what I know or some of what I know, but also to listen to the other sessions, the great teachers that are giving the other classes. It's cool to listen to them and pick up ideas. As Steve said, please, I do love questions. Hopefully I know the answers to them. And if I don't, I'll pretend that I do. No, but please don't hold back. There's an option to type in your question to Steve, to Clearwater Jazz, right here in Zoom. So whenever you have a question, please immediately write it in that way, because I have a lot of stuff to go over, and I don't want to bypass your thoughts or your questions. So today's session is about improving your technique, which I think is, one of those non-stop things that we're always trying to do, and hopefully we're trying to do. That's the issue. I think, we end up having plateaus, and once you get to a certain plateau, I'm talking musically speaking, there's a tendency to kind of relax and say, okay, I got here, finally, pat on the back, and I did it. And you can kind of relax, which is good. We all need that kind of positive affirmation. But the important part is to increase and to continue that search for more technique and better technique. So let's talk about what technique is. First of all, it is your ability, the most simple that I could explain it is, it's your ability to play what you want to play. That might sound too simple, but that's what we all want. that's that song in our ear. That's that, you just heard an awesome, incredible trumpet player play something, and you hear it in your ear and you think, wow, I want to do that. That's what I'm talking about. So we have to figure out how we can get our technique, how to improve our technique to get closer to what's going on in our head, in our ear, maybe. So it's what we want our instrument to create or recreate. I'm not the best singer, but sometimes when I'm alone or in the shower or in my car, I'll try to sing or scat something. And some of the ideas end up being kind of cool. Then how to get those cool ideas onto my horn. Because this thing, especially trumpet players, you know what I'm talking about. This is a very wicked and beautiful beast, and very unforgiving at times. So we really have to train ourselves to be able to work well with the instrument and not be overcome by the complexities of the instrument. I always think, like trumpet players, if you play long enough, you have these, underneath you get these kind of scars, and outside of your lip you get these scars sometimes, or like some places on my fingers from holding the trumpet, sustaining the trumpet for so long. It starts to change the, and this is our body's way of adapting to this instrument that we weren't born with, and we weren't born with the knowledge or the ability to play. So we're trying to do something we weren't created for, which is kind of crazy and cool. So what we have to do is we have to figure out how to train our bodies. And there's so many different, specifically talking about trumpet to trumpet players, there's so many different things involved with making your technique good enough or bettering your technique and able to play what we need to play on the instrument. So the main thing when I was talking to Steve about this original idea at Clearwater Jazz, my main thought was a lot of times, and this I'm speaking from personal experience, a lot of times jazz trumpet players especially try to figure out their own jazz technique on the trumpet. And honestly, there are certain technical things that are very specific to jazz and maybe not so much to classical. But what I realized pretty abruptly in undergrad at Youngstown State is that they are both the trumpet. And we have to bridge that gap between classical technique and jazz technique. And a lot of times jazz trumpet players don't want to be bothered with classical technique or listening classical trumpet players or practicing E-flat trumpet or piccolo trumpet. When I went to Youngstown State to do my undergrad, I was forced, kicking and screaming, to take. I was like a double major, to take classical lessons with juries and recitals, and also jazz lessons with juries and recitals and ensembles for both. So it was really, really difficult. And like I said, I went kicking and screaming the whole way, but I ended up being better off for it. And that's what I want to kind of relay to you. There's that conception that I don't need classical technique because I have jazz technique. I'll work on that, but we do. For instance, there are tons of classical method books to work on technique. I mean, I have a list. Maybe I'll send it, and it can be posted later, of classical method books that I've used, and that are the real the classic books that everyone uses and has used. For instance, we're talking about like jazz players like the great Clifford Brown. He was in 2 automobile accidents, and one taking his life. And the first one he was in pretty much in a body cast, and that's what I hear in the hospital. And he was practicing the Arbenz book, which is one of the most classic technique books for trumpet. the arbans. And that's what he was doing. And that's how his technique went from here to here. You know, he was sitting in a hospital bed and he figured, all right, I got to make the most of this. And he did. Wynton Marsalis, obviously, he has a huge history of classical, winning both the classical and jazz Grammys in the same year. First person to ever do that. He had a lot of time on his hands, I guess. And Miles Davis studied at Juilliard before he left. He was studying classical trumpet and classical literature. So these are proof. This is proof that we need it. You know, if it's good enough for them, it's good. It has to be good for us. So let's get down to, first of all, warming up, or some people call it routine, which comes from the great Bill Adam. First of all, one thing that I work on daily, or as much as I can, is the mouthpiece. And I've talked about this in some of the other classes. Some of these things I'm repeating, but I'm kind of trying to tie everything together. So mouthpiece works. This is the fundamental producer of the sound and of your technique. If this right here isn't working, then there's an issue, and it's not going to translate well to this. There are going to be problems on the trumpet if this isn't correct. So what I do, and actually, you know, these Zoom meetings, I can see myself, you know, which is good. I really suggest practicing in front of a mirror so you can see what's going on. A common issue that I struggled with for many years, and this was a technical thing that I had to work on, was bunching the chin up, and it's really common. See, my chin is moving, the sound isn't being produced, and it's not a proper technique. So what I'm going to try to do is keep that firm. Right? So working on that, and sometimes, you know, I used to work with this technique by holding my chin down, because I'd feel it trying to push up. So what I'm trying to do is switch. It doesn't really matter what notes you're playing. I guess it's better for your ear training to work on actual arpeggios. But so you want to move around the instrument, in this case the mouthpiece, and trying to get that good open sound, and this will help all of this technique. So this is, I've heard it being explained as if you fill up a balloon and you hold the tip of it, the mouth of it, and then you kind of slightly squeeze it to let air out, it gives that high-pitched sound. And that's exactly what's happening here. And what I tell my students is, I want to hear the same volume and same quality of sound from wherever you are to wherever you're going. And that helps this technique. So this is also can be linked into lip slurs. Right? What I've been doing, this is something I've been working on with lip slurs with my morning routine, is bending. Note bending is another thing to think of as far as working on your technique. It opens it up. It gets the harmonics where they need to be, the right kind of vibration, getting in the center of the note. So I kind of mix note bending with arpeggios. And so I make the top note out of tune, and then I make it in tune. So that first note, I want it to be open, the same quality, but I want it to be out of tune, slightly flat. Now I'm going to try it again with that same sensation, same feeling, same setup, but make it in tune. Right? So that I'm training my, like I was talking about before, your mouth has no idea how to play the trumpet, but you can train it. And that's what we need to do. Daily training, constant training, and improving. And this will work on technique. And these are fundamental things that will work for jazz, classical, Mexican mariachi, whatever, right? So long tones as well. I wake up, first thing I do breath attacks, not tongue attacks. Take the mute out for this. I do it as quiet and as relaxed and as long as possible, because I'm waking these things up that don't want to work, you know, when you first get out of bed. So that's the goal. That's what I'm trying to do. Wake this stuff up, and think about keeping these muscles tight and this down, but keeping this vibration happening. So this is, you know, you have to think like, if you're working, and the thing is, we have to look at this as a very serious thing. If you're serious about playing the trumpet, serious about your technique, whether it be jazz or classical, you have to be serious about how you approach it. And so I try to do that, you know, not just kind of like, okay, I got in this habit of just picking my horn and playing, and it sounded good for a couple minutes, and then, you know, everything would just fall apart. That's what I don't want. I want to be serious about it every day. I want to start off my day doing the same thing that I know will help me get in shape. And so we have to think like we're athletes, right? It's a very physical thing, especially trumpet. We're working on lungs, we're working on muscles, we're working on all that. So we have to think about it the same way. We need to stretch. Before you go and run a marathon, you need to stretch. It's the same with you know, a big practice session or a long day of playing the horn. You need to give yourself that time to warm up and make it as comfortable of a progression as possible. So this is all working on air pretty much, you know, and you can work on pedal notes too. I know Arturo Sandoval has a book on pedal notes, and he swears by, you know, that's, you know, how you get high notes, you have to play low notes. So I'm playing a fake note on the trumpet to last the lower note, but I'm putting down the same valve that it would be if it were a real note. Right? So I'm lipping that down. I'm allowing my lips to figure out how to make that sound without moving all this around. We don't want any movement here. This is the only thing that should be moving inside the vibration. So that's air. That's working on air. Then we go to fingers. A lot of technique is right here. And, you know, I sometimes put fingers on the last of the list, the end of the list, which is a bad thing to do. They're super important because, you know, if we're talking about jazz technique, to play up tempo things, you know. Right? All these fingers have to be, you know, oiled up. They have to be ready to react however and whenever you want them. So a lot of things that I do for that to keep them going are chromatic scales, and chromatic scales are kind of the left out, you know, sad scale that no one remembers. we think about all these, you know, harmonic minor and Dorian and all this, but chromatic skills are essential to getting all of this muscle, and your hand muscle, arm muscle. You see what's happening when I move my fingers? It's arm muscles as well. So we have to get all of that in condition. Right. Those of you that are familiar with the Clark Studies method book, which is excellent, that should be, if you're a trumpet player, you should definitely have that. It's the classic. It's one of the classics that we all have learned from and are still learning from. There's a chromatic exercise in it that deals with tritones, going from tritone. And then it moves all up and down. You can start at the top. Right? The third finger is the worst finger for the trumpet, as many of you know. So we need to make this as strong as possible. That means we have to play all the uncomfortable things, like get that third finger where it needs to be, have it match up with the other two. So yeah, a lot of times with technique, I think, all right, my technique is where it is. I understand it, I know it, I'm okay with it, kind of, but I want it to get better. So I throw as much complications at myself as possible. I put myself in sticky situations with the trumpet so that I know how to get out of them. I learn how to get out of those situations. And I think that's fundamental as far as getting from here to here, getting to that next plateau, that next step in your technique. Give yourself tons of challenges. If this sounds all right, do it faster. Right? Do it as many times as possible, and then start from the top. So give yourself as many challenges. Keep coming up. I mean, this is something you can do for the rest of your life. You'll never run out of challenges with the trumpet, which is a good and frustrating thing. The tongue. This is something that I've been really focusing on trying to lately. Tonguing. So if you're talking about classical, or I even mentioned mariachi, you know, like, which I love Mexican music. Latin music is beautiful. And a lot of the trumpet players are generally just so incredible. And one of the main things that I notice is how they tongue the notes. It's really crisp and strong and fast. And, you know, that sometimes is not the best approach to playing jazz, you know, so it wouldn't be right. It's kind of more crisp and aggressive than I'd want for a jazz tonguing. Jazz tonguing is different usually. So we'd call that more of a legato tonguing instead of it's more of a do 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 do, right? So if you hear someone scat singing, I try to think about this a lot and tell my students, try to scat something before you play it and see if you're making the same sound happen with your instrument. So do 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 do. Right? So with the trumpet, you want to do the same thing. Have that same kind of approach, the tongue, that kind of smooth tongue. It wouldn't be unless that's your thing, but It's not stylistically common in jazz. So working on tonguing exercises, it's the same thing. Like with fingers, we don't have to work on, and we don't have to start off with complicated Charlie Parker omnibook solos to get our fingers where they are. We can start off with what every trumpet player starts off with and continues to do, no matter what style or level of their success. For instance, fingers, we did chromatic scales to get our fingers together. And then we can move on to more jazz-like things. Same thing with tonguing. Give yourself little simple exercises that you can kind of get your tongue into shape. So I'm slurring, and then I'm tonguing. So when that's been kind of one of my goals for this time off, this home time that we're all in, is working on my tongue, trying to get it as clean as I want it, because I was never really happy with that part of my technique. So that's something I'm focusing on specifically. So when I started doing things like that, it was kind of more sloppy. Right, it didn't really speak clearly. I couldn't do it as fast as I can now. But that daily routine, that daily kind of nonstop, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to slow it down if it doesn't sound good as fast as I want it. Slow it down. I want it. I expect perfection from my practicing. That's how you get to the next level that you want to get to in your technique. That's part of improving your technique. So this is not just tonguing, not just fingers, not just air. This is everything. Everything can be boiled down to this. So that, what in college, I always refer back to my undergrad because I learned a lot. And it was very frustrating and tiring and at times, but I did learn a lot. And one thing I used to do is warm up way too much. I'd say, okay, I got 4 hours. I'm going to do an hour of warm up, and then I'm going to practice for 3 hours. And after half an hour, the first half hour, I was just dead. My lips are just falling off my face. So all this right here, what I've talked about up until now, it doesn't have to be an hour. Usually it's not, unless you're Doc Severinsen or someone like that who does that. We're just talking about, like, if you take your car to the shop and you want, you say, all right, just give me a checkup. Let me see how it's going. Is everything okay? Do I need to replace anything? They give you a checkup and they say, all good, or maybe replace this, work on this. It's the same if you go to a doctor, you say, I just want a full checkup, just make sure everything's working properly. That's what we want to do with the trumpet every day. As soon as we get that list and we check everything off and we say, okay, if something's not working, like the tongue, right? So I'm going to keep going at it until I get it. As soon as I get it, then I'm going to kind of move on to the next thing. That's the warm up. That's the routine part of it. And then we move on to practice. Practice is where you try to learn something. When you try to actually, you have this knowledge and you want to add on to your knowledge. Technique is something that we have to maintain and also improve. The practice part of the session needs to be you gaining something, adding on to your bank of knowledge. If it's a solo you've been working on, that's when you need to work. This is the time when you need to work on this, on those specific things. Now that you've worked on your technique, go on to working on specific material. And this is, improvisation, or, if a written solo or a big band chart or things of that nature. I think I saw a question about which books. if I'm correct. So yeah, I mean, there are millions of books. There was, I don't know if he's watching now, but there was a student that came for a lesson and he showed up with a pile of books like this. I mean, and I didn't know where, it's like my office isn't even that big to, get them all in. Where are you going to put them all? And, what are we going to do with all of them? I mean, it's way too much. It's like, the never ending thing. So basically, a lot of these books have the same knowledge and the same material in them. It's just kind of shown a different way because we're all different players. We kind of learn different ways. We're all different kinds of students. These are different approaches, basically getting back down to the same thing. So I made a list of some of my favorite method books that can work on technique. And this is general technique. It's coming from a classical background, but please don't get that confused with non-jazz. This should be used in your jazz playing as well. So the number one is Arbin's. If we're going to put a number one, I'm going to put the number one on Arbin's method book. That's a must-have. The other one I mentioned was the Clark Studies book. There are also Schlossberg, the Goldman, Stamp, and then my teacher, just because of how who I studied with back in the day, Phil Collins, not the singer, the Colin book, Colin, Charlier, Saxa. So those are all good. Some are, the difficulty, for instance, Charlier is a really, difficult book. It's for the more advanced player, but still, I mean, I like to keep those kind of books there in the library on the shelf, just for when I want to challenge myself and push myself to try to see if I can get, to the next level. Also, my teacher that I was talking about in classical teacher when I was a kid in Ohio, his name is Scott Johnston with a T, Johnston. And he has a couple books on sight reading and working on rhythms that I really, really suggest you check out. And they're all these are online. You can purchase them, but you didn't hear it here, but you may be able to search and find free downloadable PDFs of some of this stuff. So, because otherwise it could get kind of expensive. But so what we want to do is we don't get back to the big stack of books. So we don't want to get overwhelmed, which is really common in the trumpet world. We get overwhelmed with which mouthpiece, which horn, which mute, which valve oil, which all that. And now, which books should I be working out of? Pick a few. For instance, if you only had to choose one, choose the Arbin's. And really, it's I always say it's deceptively hard because it looks, you open it up and you say, okay, this is easy, but be as precise and obsessive as possible when you're playing these. And go online, go on YouTube and listen to people that have recorded themselves playing some of these exercises, and it will astound you. You think you got it down, you think it sounds good. Check out some of the other people that have submitted videos of them playing it, and it's just, you realize where you need to go, the end point. Any more questions, please feel free. So yeah, the obsessive kind of playing. And also, if you're in the practice room and you're working on technique, this isn't, you're not going to sound like the most beautiful trumpet player in the world. The goal is to leave the practice room or wherever you're practicing and sound better than you did coming in. But at first it's going to sound bad. It should sound bad. There's a great trombone player that posted something on Facebook a while ago, and we got into a conversation, and he said, if you sound good in the practice room, you're doing it wrong. Something like that. And I responded, I said, I'm embarrassed to practice around people or to work on technique around people because, it's really personal, and it's basically being as humble as possible and saying, all right, this part of my playing is not where it should be, or this part of my playing sounds horrible, and I need to get it better. So you're actually throwing yourself into the fire and you're saying, okay, I got to figure out how to get from this point to this point. That's your goal. Set your goals. Like the first class that I gave for this, I talked about setting goals. Set yourself little mini goals. If it's about moving your air, work on moving your air. Focus just on that, and that'll help your technique. One thing made me think of just now about range. You know, if there's a trumpet player out there that says they don't care about range, don't believe them. Range is just kind of, it's built into the trumpet player's psyche, I think. So it's something that if you want to do it, even if you don't use, you know, if you're playing jazz, you can, you don't have to necessarily use range. You could play down at the bottom part of the horn all day if you want. But it is nice to know and to have that part of your technique just in case. You know, if you sit in with a big band and it calls for higher notes, you don't want that freak out moment at that, you know, in that instance. You want to have that reserve. You want to have that ability to call upon. So let's talk about, you know, just real quick with range is direction of air. How do you use your air? Everyone used to say, you know, more air, more air. And if I use more air, that's what I get. It kind of gets to the higher harmonic, and that's it. It kind of, you know, the intonation goes bad. I used more air, but that's not what really we're talking about. What we're talking about is the velocity of the air. And when I started thinking about that, that really opened up my mind. The Schlossberg book is excellent for this. That's when I started to really improve my range, that part of my technique, Schlossberg. And it has a lot of these things where you're coming, you know, arpeggios or things like that. It's really simple stuff, but keeping it as level and as clean and precise as possible. So we're not hearing, you know, no unevenness. I want the same thing in the whole part of the horn. So that teaches you, to, again, to keep this where it needs to be. And no matter if you're playing up higher or not. So going back to the velocity of the air, if I want to go play higher, I'm going to play faster. Right? So what I'm thinking is, you know, slow to fast to slow. It's the same thing for those of you that can whistle. Even if you're not a trumpet player out there, do this, whistle with me. No one can hear you. You're all muted, so don't worry. So whistle from low to high, if you can whistle. Now keep doing it and think about what your tongue and air is doing, what they're doing during that. What mine and yours should be doing naturally, without thinking about it, is the air gets faster, right? And the tongue kind of curls to the front. And that's happening simultaneously. Something that, like I said, we never really thought about it. We never practiced that probably, but it's what our bodies know how to do. That one thing we do know how to do. So transfer that to the mouthpiece, transfer that to the trumpet. So the same thing. Right, so I'm gonna do the same kind of movement. Faster air, tongue kind of moves up, and that's where we're gonna get our range from. If you can't whistle, just do o-ee, 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 o, o-ee, o-ee, o. Same thing, the air gets faster and the tongue pushes. O-ee, o-ee, o. It's the same movement that needs to happen with the trumpet. Once again, Schlossberg is great for that, Schlossberg book. Let's see. So yeah, so like I said, you're going into the practice room, working on these techniques. You should go in. You should leave the practice room sounding better than when you go in. If you can't get to that point and you're getting tired and fatigued, that's when you stop. This is a moment where no pain, no gain is not a good motto. If there's pain, put the horn down, go for a walk, watch some TV, get a bite to eat, relax. And then when you feel more relaxed here, then go back. And also here, trumpet is a very mental thing. So we have to be patient with ourselves. Like I said, this isn't something we do naturally. We have to kind of train ourselves. So we have to have a lot of room for error. When you get frustrated, when it starts to hurt, when it's not working, put the horn down. You'll be surprised that if you have a fresh new take on it, you take 15 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour, and then come back at it, it'll kind of make more sense what you're working on. So all of these things I use for, and I'm not a classical player. I wish I was a great classical player. But I'm still struggling with jazz. I'm still working on jazz. There's a lot to work on. But these are techniques and ways to improve your technique for the trumpet. And that's what we have to keep in mind, that we're all trumpet players and we need that same facility and that same endurance and that same power and flexibility for whatever we're doing, right? Right. Hopefully you got something out of this. And like Steve said, you can email me at jamessuggs80@gmail.com if you have any further questions. I'm going to try to get that list to Steve of the method books that I think everyone should have, or at least check out. So yeah, keep practicing, and we'll see you soon.